So he hasn't been taking this seriously. He's been asleep at the wheel. He's been focused on other issues, and we saw that all last year. And he lacks any credibility saying that he's going to solve this problem now after 2 years.
That's my style. I hope you've noticed that.
Returning now to our top story, the Prime Minister has indicated there will be more cost of living support in the May budget as Australians continue to grapple with soaring interest rates and inflation. Joining me now live is Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us for the afternoon. So Anthony Albanese has tasked Treasury and Finance to come up with new ways to address the cost of living crisis. What should they be?
Well, can I say, Danica, up front, that Australians have been waiting 18 months for the Prime Minister to take this seriously. And now he's saying he might do something after 2 years, May next year, 2 years after they came to government.
A great example of us providing cost of living relief.
It's not good enough. What they should be doing and should have been doing for the last 18 months is taking pressure off inflation. We know from history that taking pressure off inflation means taking pressure off spending, not adding over $20,000 of spending for every Australian household. It means industrial relations policies that don't put union officials between employers and employees. It means genuine competition policy, not crony capitalism as we've seen with Labor and Qantas. And so in area after area, this government has made a bad situation worse.
That's my style. I hope you've noticed that.
Now, to date, the Prime Minister hasn't even directly asked the Treasury Secretary to give him a briefing on inflation. So he hasn't been taking this seriously. He's been asleep at the wheel. He's been focused on other issues, and we saw that all last year. And he lacks any credibility saying that he's going to solve this problem now after 2 years.
Our priority will be to provide cost of living relief whilst taking pressure off the impediments.
Well, what should the government do? What areas should they be focusing on to provide some relief?
Well, first of all, take pressure off inflation. The one thing that provides cost of living pressure to every single Australian is lower inflation, Danica. Less price rises, and we've seen price rises across almost every single category of goods and services. And at Christmas and New Year, Australians are really feeling that pain in buying gifts for their loved ones, in paying for their Christmas meals, in paying for the family holidays, in preparing for school, going back in later this month. All of those things have been massive points of pressure for Australian families, and taking pressure off inflation is the answer to a cost of living crisis. It always has been. But this is not a Prime Minister who's been interested in that or focused in it. He's been distracted. He's been asleep at the wheel. He focused much of last year on his failed referendum. And I went through the list of things that he could have been doing: less spending, not adding to tax. We had 27% increase in taxes for Australians in the time that Labor has been in government. See, gobsmacking numbers, bracket creep and other tax imposts have creeped on Australians and really dug into their disposable incomes, which have fallen faster than any single advanced country in the world, major advanced countries in the world. We are at the wrong end of it. We're at the back of the pack. And this Prime Minister has failed, and now to say he might do something in May, it's laughable.
If you were just to distribute additional cash to people, you potentially make inflation worse and therefore don't help to solve the problem.
And the number one issue in Australia at the moment is cost of living. And Australians have just seen hundreds of millions of dollars flush down the toilet because the Prime Minister wants to put his place in the history books. Shame on him.
Shame, shame, shame.
More money. Today, Anthony Albanese announced that our aid to Ukraine will now come up to $910 million.
In order to continue to put that downward pressure on inflation.
Laughable. It's laughable.
Just before we let you go, I want to ask you about energy. Energy retailers want the market regulator to increase the default bill customers have to pay because of the challenges of managing Australia's solar power supply. Do you think that's right?
Well, I'll make a couple of comments about this. This is more information that Labor is failing in its promise to deliver a $275 reduction in prices for all Australians. They promised that at the last election. They're not even close. We've seen big price hikes despite the fact that they've thrown money at it. And so it has been a real failure for this government. The second point I'd make is if Chris Bowen is serious about this, he will be grappling and fighting hard on these issues every day. I had to. I've got to tell you, I wasn't getting Christmas cards from the energy retailers when I was energy minister, but we got prices down by 9 or 10%, depending on if you're industrial or residential customers. So we saw very, very significant price reductions. That's not what we're seeing with this government because they're not serious about the real issues, which is getting more supply into the market that's dispatchable, that's flexible, that's there when you flick the switch. Not just when the sun is shining, and that hasn't been the focus of Chris Bowen.
We all know that the challenge that we have with global inflation, with pressures on our economy, mean that Australians are really doing it tough, and we need a better government.